So we want to begin this conversation with you, Miss Alice. You know, when I saw you behind bars, and now you are unbowed and unbroken. But I don't think we fully understand what you've gone through. You know, most of us here have not been in a jail or in a prison. Most of us here do not know what it's like to have a loved one behind bars. And so I wonder if you can begin us and ground us in the experience of being in a human cage for over 2 decades, and what it was like to be in that human cage as a mother and as a grandmother.
As a mother, it meant not being able to even have a conversation where I could embrace my children. I tried to mother them from the inside. It meant being a grandmother, that my only connection to my grandchildren, my only communication was in prison. My children have gone through many life experiences while I've been gone away from them. But through all of those things, we've stayed connected as a mother and as children. My children, 2 of my children are here with me today. I try to embrace them now as much as I can, because on a visitation day, that was not possible. There was only one quick hug at the beginning of the visit, and then nothing else. I have not been that mother there to comfort my children as they have faced life challenges. And I was not there for the death of a sister, the death of both of my parents, and because of the length of my sentence, I was not allowed to go to their funerals, even though I'm a nonviolent offender and I was not a safety factor in the community. And there were others who got behind me who said that they would make sure that I was in the correct custody. So everything that happened in my family, I had to grieve alone. I had to not have closure on any situations. And it meant that I missed all of the celebratory events in my children's lives and in my family's lives. As I have come home, they've shared with me photo albums so I could catch up on the things that took place while I was away. But out of those pictures, I'm missing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you know, when we talk about incarceration and we talk about these long sentences that so many have had to serve for first-time nonviolent felonies, we often don't think about those individuals as women, and that the majority of those individuals who are women behind bars have children.
That's right. Some of my worst experiences were in visitation, watching them drag children out screaming for their mothers. So many women are caught up in this system. In fact, the rate of incarceration for women has increased by 800%. It is the fastest growing population, and it's not because women have become more evil. It is because of the system, the way that it is set up. So many of those women who, like myself, came in as a first-time offender, we don't know the ropes. We don't know, as our speaker just spoke on, about taking a plea. Somehow I believed in the system of going to trial. That was a very bad mistake on my part, because I was offered, not officially, but I was offered through my attorney. They told him 3 to 5 years. How does 3 to 5 years turn into a life without the possibility of parole? It's because those who are used to this system know that you are rewarded for your testimony. Mm-hmm. I turned from a low-level offender into being at the very top of the chart because I exercised my right to go to trial. So what it amounted to was those who testified against me who are offered incentives could make these fantastic tales of what we in prison call ghost dope. My charges are attempted possession. You either possess it or you don't possess it. So for that, I received a life sentence.
And Mark, I know that you know Miss Alice's stories and all of the many, many stories like Miss Alice. As Kim said, Miss Alice is not alone in what she represents around mandatory minimums, overcriminalization. I know you know her story and the stories of so many, and you, Koch Industries, many Republican leaders have really taken on the issue of justice reform as a cause, as a priority. And what I want to understand better from you is, how is it, right, that Republicans have become the most passionate advocates for criminal justice reform?
Well, good question. Thanks for having me here today, and I'll play the role of the Republican like you want me.
Thank you very much.
But here's the deal. I mean, any system that would incarcerate Miss Alice for more than a very short period of time is not a just system. Let's all agree on that. I mean, that's the number one problem with our criminal justice system. It's not a justice system. It's not just. We have a legal system. And to answer your question, I look at this issue as one, it's in my opinion, if not the gravest injustice of our time, it's up there. It's real close. And from my perspective, this is one similar to whether it's abolition, women's suffrage, civil rights, marriage equality. This is one where everybody comes together. You know, put aside the red and the blue jerseys. We're not playing shirts and skins. This is real. This needs to get fixed. It is a grave injustice. It's beneath us as a society. And if you look at the system from beginning to end, and what Kim said is absolutely right, it needs to be totally blown up and disrupted. Everything we're basically doing, until recently in some of the states, and we'll talk about that, everything has been the exact opposite of what you'd do if you really cared about people and cared about victims and cared about communities. So from our perspective, the way we look at it is we want a system, everybody wants public safety, got that, for sure, it's an important issue, but it's got to be based on equal rights, and it needs to be redemptive. It needs to be all about second chances. We need to give people another chance, or a third chance, or a fourth chance, as President Trump said at a rally for the First Step Act. He's in favor of second or third or fourth chances, and that's great. And we need to have a system that is worthy of us. If you look at our system today, we look at it through three different lenses, the moral case, the constitutional case, and the fiscal case. Real quickly, this system is completely immoral. Again, what happened to Miss Alice? As Brian Stevenson says, it's a system that treats the rich and guilty better than the poor and innocent. If you don't have resources, you are getting run over in this system. From a constitutional perspective, we denigrate our Constitution, the Bill of Rights, every single day. It's happening right now somewhere. The 4th, 5th, 6th, and 8th Amendments in the Bill of Rights, 40% of the Bill of Rights deal with criminal justice issues. They were there to warn us that the greatest threat to life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness was going to be the criminal justice system. We haven't heeded that. And like I said, every single day, 6th Amendment rights in a lot of places, the right to an attorney, not honored, not offered. And I could go on and on, but I don't want to. Last piece is the fiscal case. We look at it through the fiscal case, our criminal justice system, and it's been a disaster. But that's where the reforms have started. And it started, believe it or not, in a lot of red states. Texas, for example. Texas, back in 2007, when Rick Perry was governor, implemented some criminal justice reform measures. 10 years later now, they have the lowest crime rate they've had since the 1960s. They've closed 8 prisons and saved $4 billion. That's just part of the story. Now, the reality is, it's a blue and a red state issue. The red states, Republicans needed to lead on this issue because they really did a lot to demonize and politicize the criminal justice system to begin with. But what we've seen is whether it's a blue governor, a red governor, or whatever in between, they come in, and it makes sense. Governors are responsible for their budgets. They come in for the savings, but they stay for the salvation. And that's what we see again and again in stories like Alice's. So that's why we're in this fight, and everybody should be in this fight, because it's really beneath us what we're doing now, and it's making us less safe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so I want to understand that better, you would argue that the reason why this is a Republican cause is from a fiscal perspective, but also how there has been a transformation around understanding the human costs of what has been done.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's a Republican issue or not. I think the Republicans need to lead on it because of the Willie Horton stuff.
Right.
Not that the Democrats didn't do things like that with the Clinton crime bill, but the Willie Horton thing, it was, in my opinion, it was 1988, and I think that Republicans needed to lead on it because Democrats would be afraid to do it from a political perspective. But this, to me, is beyond any red or blue divide. This is a fundamental liberty thing. This is about, are we a just, moral country or not? And right now, I mean, it's getting better, but it's not. It's a terrible system where we just lock people up, and it's usually the least among us, people who probably don't need to be in prison at all and probably don't need to be in that long. A couple of statistics real quick, and I'll stop. You are what you spend in our country, let's be real, right? We know this. So from 1990 to 2005, we built, on average, every 10 days in this country, a jail or a prison, okay? That's what we did with our money then, all right? And if you look at our criminal justice spending now, we spend 3 to 4 times more per capita on locking people up than we do on K through 12 education. So if you are what you eat, you are what you spend. We need to change that dynamic.
That's right. Absolutely. After that. So, Ms. Alice, you have been free for only 4 months. And for those of you who don't know the full story, we worked with Miss Alice when she was behind bars. We had the privilege of doing a YouTube summit where we were able to use a YouTube platform to scale the prison walls and bring Miss Alice in from behind bars and speak to creators and media folk at this summit. And that is how Mike.com learned about you. And then we worked with Mike.com to do that digital op-ed that went viral that led to Kim Kardashian learning about you. But, I have to say that the first time we did this and you told your story and you were in the prison jumpsuit and on the phone and speaking to us, I didn't have a lot of belief that you would be free. I didn't believe that this day would come. And I'm just wondering, when you were behind bars, how did you have faith that this day would be here?
Well, I can tell you, I'm an optimist, but I'm also a woman of faith. There was no way that I was going to allow anyone to change who I am to the core. People can try to take away your dignity, but it's up to you whether or not you give it to them. They could take away my life as a free woman, but it was still up to me whether or not I would give them who I am as a person to control my life, to control my thoughts. Looking beyond bars, dreaming beyond bars, hoping and holding on to my hope was something that is embedded in me. And one of the things, too, is looking around at other women who were in such worse condition than I was, made me realize just how blessed I was. There were women who had suffered from mental health issues. There were women who had their families who had abandoned them. My family was standing close alongside me. Mm-hmm. Hope is a terrible thing to tell someone not to have anymore. Mm-hmm. I was told that I would only leave prison as a corpse. I'm sitting here right now, and I'm not a corpse. They messed up, and they allowed me to see something that was beyond who I was. I saw women who I could impact in prison. I saw young women. I saw old women. I saw middle-aged women. That if I could give them a spark of hope, and that's what I was able to accomplish in prison with them. I've sat with women who were suicidal to tell them, I'm here for you. I've sat with women who were hospice, who were dying, to say, I'm not going to allow you to die alone. I've had to counsel with women to tell them, I understand. These were women who came into prison feeling as if they were thrown away, because that is how our prison system is set up. It is a warehouse for humans, and it is against everything that we believe in as a nation. This is more, Malika, than just a social issue. This is a humanitarian issue.
Absolutely. You shared with me, yeah. You shared with me, and I'm hoping you can share with all of us, that day that you were released, which was unexpected because
Yes.
usually when you receive clemency, you have to wait 4 or 5 months to actually walk out of the prison. But you walked out hours
Yes.
after finding out that you had been granted clemency. Can you share with us what that experience was?
The day that I was set free from prison was one of the greatest days of my life, as you can imagine. But it was a Wednesday, and Wednesday is Hamburger Day. And so I was not going to miss Hamburger Day. It was on the news, a possibility that I might be released that day. But I had to guard my heart. I had so many false alarms. Me and my family, we've been on a roller coaster ride with this, expecting during the Clemency Project 2014 that for sure you're going to be released, because I had letters and the support of staff, the support of the community, the support of everyone. So I'd already gone through this roller coaster. So when they were telling me that you're on TV, they're saying you may be released, I went in my room and I shut the door. I didn't want to hear anything else until I heard over the intercom say, "Chow time, report to the dining room." So I heard my name called over the intercom while I was eating my hamburger, and to report back to the unit. And when I arrived, the unit manager was waiting to give me a legal call, which was not unusual because since Kim had been involved, I was receiving a lot of legal calls from the legal team that she had hired and put together. When I arrived in the back, my attorneys were on the phone, and then I heard Kim come on, and we were talking normal, and she asked me, she said she realized I didn't know. She said, "Miss Alice, you don't know, do you?" I said, "No, what?" She said that you can go home. You can go home. He signed it, you can go home. That's all that I heard was you could go home, and I think I jumped from the bottom of the floor to the top of the ceiling. It was like the Bionic Woman or something, but I was screaming and I could hear everyone else because by this time, because I had insulated myself from everything, the other women knew that I had been granted because it was over the TV. And I could hear screaming and everyone, it was pandemonium, but it was of the good kind. And when I left, when they walked me out of the door, there's 4 buildings, and each building, there's 4 different blocks or units. So it houses, there were about 1,300 women there on that day, and it sounded like an earthquake. The women were at the bars. They were at their doors. They were beating on the doors. They were screaming. They were crying. They were congratulating. All you could hear, it sounded like thunder, really, or an earthquake. It was so loud there. These are women that I had been mother to, sister, grandmother, friend, and they were celebrating my going home. I've been told don't ever look back, but I looked back because I don't ever want to forget the faces of those women with their faces pressed to the bars and screaming and crying because I was leaving. And as I passed through them, I had to pass the camp. Every woman in the camp was standing outside at the camp part because I was in a more secure part. And they were all clapping and screaming. It sounded more than like a football game. And there were only about 200 women there that I had to pass through. And then when I saw my family on the other side, I didn't jaywalk. Someone said that I jaywalked, but I didn't. I did stop. If you look at the video, because someone said she's already committing a crime. She's jaywalking.
It's not a crime. No.
But I did stop. I almost didn't, but I stopped. And I looked to see if a car was coming. And then I rushed into the arms of my family. And I want to tell all of you that that was a day. I saw a sign out. Someone had created something that says, "Hey, Google, tell me something good." On that day, it was, hey world, we've got something good to show you. We're going to tell you something good and show you something good. A family reuniting with their loved one after almost 22 years. And this was one thing on that one day that united the whole country as they celebrated with me and my family.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Mark, I know that a lot of your work has been to insist on sentencing reform, right, as a way of dismantling what created mass incarceration. But there's also this issue of cash bail that Kim talked about. Yeah. If you could just talk a little bit more about the injustice of cash bail.
Yeah, no, I thought Kim covered it really well, but I mean, go back to the 8th Amendment in the Bill of Rights, which is a very key document in our country. It talks about bail. It mentions bail in there, but it's not, hey, go get you some bail. It's a good thing. It said bail should not be excessive. And so, from my perspective, and I am not a constitutional lawyer, I don't play one on TV, but from my perspective, what that means is that, well, if someone's not a threat to public safety, not a flight risk, there should be no bail. That's right. And that's reinforced by a Supreme Court case from the 1980s. Chief Justice Rehnquist wrote the opinion where it said that the norm in our society is freedom pending the hearing of your case. We don't do pretrial detention. But for whatever reason, like we have with a lot of different aspects, unfortunately, of our criminal justice system, we try to use it as a cash cow, use it to raise money, whether it's asset forfeiture or fines and fees, you name it. There are a lot of them. But for whatever reason, over the years, we've developed a cash bail system where everybody, regardless of the offense, regardless of whether they're a threat to public safety, regardless of whether they're a flight risk, has to pay something. And that's wrong. It's inconsistent with the Constitution and what it leads to are the outcomes that Kim talked about. And it should be based on risk, not resources. But our whole criminal justice system is built on the two-tiered system because it's a failed, broken, big government program. And we have focused instead on whether or not someone can put money up, and if they can get out, and if they can't, well, then they stay locked up. And that leads to people ending up losing their, if you can't afford $1,000, which for a lot of people might as well be $1 million, you can lose your job. You can lose your family, you can lose your possessions, waiting for your case to be heard. So, what people will do then is plead guilty to something, even if they're innocent, so they can get back out there and go to work. Well, then when they find out, they go back to work, they've got a criminal record, and they get fired. So we're very much supportive of what you all did at Google. Thank you for doing that.
So let me interrupt for a second, and let's talk about what we did. So in the springtime, Google banned ads from the bail bond industry on search. So there are no longer on search bail bond ads. And we got a little bit of heat for that decision, and you publicly stood up for us and talked about how this was the right decision for our company to make. Why'd you do that? Other than the fact that you had to.
Because it was the right thing for you. We supported you. We think again, the whole criminal justice system from beginning to end, we could talk about it for hours, needs to be totally disrupted and revamped. But the bail system in particular, and who entraps and just how it's used to just ruin people's lives, it seems, that was the right call. And then it's your business. You have the right to allow what you want on your platform. And we supported you for not doing that. I mean, you've got a First Amendment right for that. Again, I'm a sucker for the Bill of Rights, the oldies, and the First Amendment and others. So you did the right thing, and you made a call on it, even though it may have affected your business and your revenues. I don't know. But it's the right thing to do. And when people do the right thing, we try to stand by them and work with them. And that's why we did it.
So, Ms. Alice, you, from behind bars, you said to us as a company that to whom much is given, much is required. And you asked us to take responsibility and to bear witness. And Mark, you have lived that out in your criminal justice reform work. And I guess what I want to know more is, for those of us who are in this room, right, how can we all take action? How can we bear witness to be able to disrupt the human costs of mass incarceration?
Well, I think that as you leave here from this great event, as you've seen my face, it's already been told to you that I'm not the only one. Yes, we celebrate my release. We celebrate my being reunited with my family. But I'm just a small piece of it. I'm here on this platform today because I want to humanize this issue. Reading about me or just seeing a story is different than getting a visual. I hope that you've taken a snapshot today of me and placed it in your minds so that you can't just walk away from this untouched. If you don't do something, there are people who are depending on you for their very lives. You must become active in this. You must let your voices be heard. I'm very thankful that Google as a company, and I'm happy to be here, but I have to speak the truth about this. Google as a company has stepped up to the plate and said, we are not going to turn a blind eye. We are going to do something to get the message out, but they're not only getting the message out, they're putting their money where that message is going. They're backing it up with real change. We can make a difference. We can change a system. That is our history as Americans. One person. There was only one shot, and it was called the shot that was heard around the world. I want to be that face that is seen around the world.
Thank you. Mark?
So, look, a couple things. I grew up, I've had a different view of people who are in prison. I worked in a prison when I was in college to pay for college. Mm-hmm. And then after that, I was a janitor in a factory, and most of the people that worked there were on work release. So I've always had a different idea about who goes to prison and why. From my perspective, grew up in Worcester, Massachusetts, working class background. A lot of my friends were incarcerated when I was a prison guard. And it easily could have been me. I think I just had parents who rode me harder than their parents did. But it was from an early age. I was an 18, 19-year-old kid and really wasn't thinking a whole lot about a lot of things, productive for sure. But it didn't make sense to me back then. And one of the things that never made sense to me back then was, okay, so they screwed up. They were drug addicts. They did this. They did that. Well, there was no drug treatment. Then they couldn't get a job. Then they're back in. And it just wasn't a system that made sense at all. And it still doesn't. So for me, and at Cook Industries, we're very focused on second chances. And the whole idea, we've got in this country, believe it or not, after you serve your prison sentence, we think everyone who does that should be allowed to just have all their rights back, right? That's the deal. You pay your debt to society, you get them back, right? Okay. But the reality is we have over 52,000 collateral consequences to a criminal conviction in this country. And that keeps people, it's the second prison, the one they don't always talk about. But once you get out, you can't get housing, you can't get benefits, you cannot get education loans, you can't get a job, you can't vote. And so what are we doing? I mean, do we want people to get better and not become more violent over time and not hurt others? Do we not want that? That's why it's very important to support legislation. Now in Florida, I don't know anyone here from Florida? All right, Amendment 4, right? You're all on that? Restoring rights for people who have felony convictions in Florida so they can vote, right? No? Yeah? That's a big deal. We need to fix that. We need to get rid of the one-size-fits-all. We need to have a system that when people come out, based on a public safety concern, they may not be able to do a certain job, get an education loan, not live somewhere, but it's not a one-size-fits-all, because that's just not just, and it ends up making things worse. So that's one thing. The other thing I like to say is we need acts of Congress, absolutely. Congress needs to pass the First Step Act. We're running out of time if you want to learn more about it. It's prison reform, and it has some sentencing reform as well, which will be great. And acts of Congress are absolutely essential, but we need more acts of conscience. We need people in the communities working in schools, keeping people out of the system. We're very focused, like I said, on hiring the formerly incarcerated. We have a new pilot program in 4 states, a reentry program called Safe Streets Second Chances, and I'll tell you more about that. But the whole idea is, if people end up in prison, it shouldn't be that ordinary. It should be extraordinary if we do things right. We get education right, we get jobs and communities right, and all these other things. So if we do that, and people still go to prison, the goal is reentry begins day 1 of incarceration, not 6 months out, so they never go back. That's the best thing we can do. So those are my thoughts.
So I think we have time for only 2 questions. If anybody just wants to raise their hand and be able to put forth their question. Yes, back there.
That Coke spends a lot of money lobbying and whatever causes, and you have your right to do that. Can you tell us how much money you have spent lobbying in Congress to create the bills that you just mentioned, and which congressional candidates this year you have spent money in lobbying for to bring about the kind of reforms we're talking about here?
I'd have to check the LDA. This is the only issue I lobby on, and been doing it for many years. And we've been working with the left and the right on it. I'm good friends with Cory Booker and Mike Lee. So we've been, I want to be humble because I got a lot to be humble about. But we have been a major factor in the fact that this bill, the First Step Act, is even where it is right now and got through the House. We had the whole Freedom Caucus vote for that, the most conservatives of the conservatives. So we've worked hard on that. I don't know all the people we're supporting in different races. Again, I'm very much proud of where I work and what I do, and I'm really just focused on this issue. And so we've spent a lot of time and a lot of money on the First Step Act. We spent a lot of money and a lot of time in the states. We haven't even talked about the states, obviously. We've been in 10 or 15 different states this year, passed major reforms that are going to help people improve their lives and help people get a second chance.
Is there another question that folks want to put forward? No? You sure? Back there.
Yes, just why is there such reluctance to look outside of the US for inspiration on reform? I've read in The Economist this week is talking about the incarceration rate in America being 4.5 times greater than the UK, where I'm from. Why not look outside of the US for inspiration on how to improve the system?
The what side?
Great question.
Why don't we look outside of the United States?
Oh, yeah, we should.
I know that the Vera Institute right now is in Germany, looking at their prison system, which has a model that is so much more humane. It looks at keeping families together, and they're looking at what keeps the country safe in terms of, and also they're looking at returning citizens and what they can do to help people be successful as returning citizens. So I know that they are looking at other models of their penal system to try to fix this one. One of the things that we have to do is we have to know, and that's one thing that I have been speaking a lot about, is support the candidates who support prison reform. If you're interested in that, support those, vote your conscience, vote what is important to you. If we could get to that point as a nation, I think we'd see a lot of things fixed.
Yep. The only thing I'd add is that it's really difficult to compare our system to anyone else's because nobody incarcerates as many people as we do over things that really, some of them shouldn't be an incarceration issue anyway, or for such long periods of time. Mandatory minimums, which are not based on any data, evidence. When mandatory minimums started in the 80s, crime rates were already going down. Then they did more in the 90s. But what we know now, based on data and evidence-based practices, that a number of things that have worked in other jurisdictions for low-level nonviolent offenders have been implemented. The big issue for us in our society is the number of people that we have deemed violent offenders, and how does that look, and how do you deal with that? But we got so much to do. If we could get to a system like you're talking about, that'd be wonderful. But we got to start somewhere, and we're starting, with the lowest common denominators at some level, but it's still important. And that's why the prison reform issues in particular are important, particularly at the federal level. It will reduce the size of the prison population because it will reduce recidivism. And so Call your congressperson about that, call your senator, and hopefully we can get something done. The leader of the Senate Majority, Mitch McConnell, has said that there will be a whip count after the midterms, and my sense is the votes are there. The 60 plus could be 70, and that'd be great. So whoever your congress people are, to the extent you're interested in that, call them up, see where they are on the issue and what they're going to do after the midterms to get it done. Democrat, Republican, Independent, Whig, I don't care what party it is, let's just get this done.
I just want to add also that in the women's criminal justice reform movement, there has been a lot of looking towards what other countries do around women and children and keeping the children with their mothers during incarceration, because we are the only country that separates the children from the mothers when the mothers are put behind bars.
Can I say one last thing? I am really sorry, but this bill, the First Step Act, one of its provisions, I kid you not, is that they will no longer be allowed to shackle pregnant women while they're giving childbirth. Well, which is a big deal.
Because we ended it at the federal level, but the law of the land in most states is that mothers are shackled during labor, childbirth, and post-delivery. Indeed. Indeed. It is, when I first heard about it, I was also in disbelief, but we have an opportunity to end what is absolutely a draconian practice. I want to just end with gratitude to both of you for being here and for talking to us with full heart and full commitment to this work. I want to thank the work that's been done at Google. .org has given $35 million in funding to criminal justice organizations. And yes, clap for that. And I think it's also important to note that we've done this work not just from the place of philanthropy, but also policy. And for that, I want to thank Susan Molinari, who is our VP for Public Policy. I think it's so important for us to prioritize this as policy, and I think that the work that we have done, that you've allowed us to do, really has made us better as a company. So thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being part of this conversation.
Good job.